All right, how you doing, guys? Welcome back to the channel. A little bit flustered. I had a couple of technical difficulties before, but here we are. Welcome back to Food Fight Club. Thanks for joining us. And tonight we're going to cover what's called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment. Okay, this is something I did. I was prompted by my intuitive eating coach 8 years ago to look it up and read about it. And I did it then, and then I did it a couple of times over the past 8 years, just to kind of refresh my memory and see if I could find any more information about it. This video, I compiled information from about 4 or 5 articles online. So it's all about the effects of starvation physiologically and psychologically on humans. I don't know, I think it was the first study of its kind, and I read somewhere, I know I did, I never saved it, but at the end of the study, this is just a tease, one of the researchers, if not the key researcher, he said that it was cruel and inhumane and it should never be done on humans again. I know I read that somewhere, I just can never find it. I wish I could have, so I could have it definitively, but that's the tease. So let's get into it. So the clinical study performed that was called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment was at the University of Minnesota on November 19th, 1944. It began, and it ended on December 20th, 1945. It was designed to determine the physiological and psychological effects of severe and prolonged dietary restriction and the effectiveness of dietary rehabilitation strategies. Okay, there was 2 purposes to the study. One was to produce a definitive treatise on the physical and psychological effects of prolonged famine-like semi-starvation on healthy men, as well as subsequent effectiveness of dietary rehabilitation from this condition. And the second purpose was to use the scientific results to guide the Allies' relief assistance to famine victims in Europe and Asia at the end of World War II. So they were wondering what it's going to be like after the war when they have so many people all over the continent of Europe and Asia who are starving, and they wanted to see what the best way to remedy that whole situation would be. So they decided to do their little study. It's not a study on thousands of people. You'll see here. It was coordinated with the Civilian Public Services. So they had conscientious objectors, who were men that didn't want to join the military but wanted to help in the war effort at home. So they chose these men from a pool of 200 volunteers. There's different numbers on that too. Some say 400, some say 200. They tested both physically and psychologically these men to make sure they were fit for the study. And they were in the age range of, let's say, 20 to 30. Some articles say 20 to 25, some say 22 to 33, but these were young, strapping, fit, psychologically well young men of the 1940s. Okay, so from here we'll go to who the principal investigators were. Dr. Ansel Keys, you may have heard his name. He was a physiologist and a professor at the University of Minnesota. He was the one who came up with the military K rations. He was the one who formulated it, tested it, and the military used his K rations for the field. I don't know, for mostly, probably like airmen or whatever, but he came up with that. So the K was for Keys, his last name. He also did the 7 countries study, which there is controversy over because they said it was more than 7 countries, and the countries that didn't prove his point were, not used in the study. So it was kind of skewed. Then he also came up with the Mediterranean diet. So that's a pretty popular thing till today. The major portion of his life's work was for like the military industrial complex, because they wanted to know, the ins and outs of nutrition and diet and everything like that for their own knowledge. Joseph Bozek was the second guy. He was a psychologist. He was a statistical analyst of the results. So he analyzed everything. His research prior and post concerned malnutrition and behavior, visual illumination and performance, and aging. The next guy was Austin Henschel. He was responsible for screening the CPS volunteers with another gentleman, Henry Taylor, who was one of the principal investigators for selection. He was given charge over blood morphology, scheduling tests and measurements of subjects during the course of study. He was a member of the faculty at the University of Minnesota. Okay, so the last guy was Henry Taylor. He was a PhD. He recruited the volunteers from CPS. He maintained the morale of the participants. He collaborated with Austin Henschel, the other investigator, in conducting the physical performance, respiration, and postural tests. And his research concentrated on problems in cardiovascular physiology, temperature regulation, metabolism, nutrition, aging, and cardiovascular epidemiology. Okay, so the study was done in 3 phases, but number 3 also had a second phase, like a B phase, 3B. The first phase was the control period. It was 12 weeks. This is where the participants consumed a normal diet of about 3,200 to 3,500 calories daily. They adjusted the calories to individual needs initially for the 12 weeks. They maintained an active lifestyle, pursued education, and worked in laundry or other physical work. In phase 2, the semi-starvation period, which was 24 weeks, the calorie intake was dropped to an average of 1,570 calories per day, based on typical wartime European diets. So the meals consisted largely of bread, potatoes, turnips, and cabbage, with minimal meat and dairy. But they maintained the normal level of physical activity. So they were still making them do the same physical activity as before, the prior 12 weeks. Then we had phase 3, which was the rehabilitation phase. That was 12 weeks also. The participants were divided into groups, receiving various calorie increases from 400 to 1,600 extra calories per day. Some were also given protein or vitamin supplements and placebos to assess their role in recovery. Okay, so that's how they monitored how people would recover from this semi-starvation phase. And then phase 3B was another 8 weeks of unrestricted rehabilitation period, during which there were no limits on calorie intake. Okay, so they let them eat whatever they wanted, and we'll get into that later on. So the subjects, the selection was very stringent for the subjects. They had to be male, they had to be single, they had to demonstrate good physical and mental health, they had to get along well with others under trying circumstances, and they had to have an interest in relief work. So all that were chosen, that was the top priority. The research objectives: the men had to lose 25% of their normal body weight. So you're talking about, if a guy was 175 pounds, he had to lose about 42 pounds. And that's really, you have to look this up online and look at the pictures of the guys. They were like skin and bones. They got swelling. It was all kinds of stuff that happened to them. The next objective was phase 2 was only 2 meals per day. So in the semi-starvation phase, they broke up that 1,570 calories into 2 meals. They were required to work 15 hours per week in the lab. They also had to participate in a variety of educational activities for 25 hours a week. So that's 40 hours a week. They're keeping them busy. They had to walk 22 miles per week, which is 3.14 miles per day. I don't know if any of you, are walkers, but 3 miles is a, substantial walk. And they also had to submit to the methods of measurements for the physiological and psychological changes brought on by near starvation. So, they had to agree that they would be tested in whatever way that the investigators would test them. Okay. So this next section is like the biggest section. This is where they saw, where the rubber met the road. It's all the results and observations. And this mostly was from an article in the Duke Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences article, okay? So the cognitive differences were compared to the start of the study. There were significant difference in themes of cognition. Food and eating became focal points in conversation, reading, dreams, and daydreams. Some developed concentration issues due to their preoccupation with food. They started reading cookbooks. They started collecting recipes. 3 participants even changed occupations and became chefs. And one other one went into agriculture after. So there were eating changes in baseline noticed behavior. Okay, so during meals, they became possessive over their food. They worried that others may try to eat their meals. They would guard their food defensively with their elbows. They would eat like this and, make sure nobody else took their food. At meals, participants were recorded eating all the food on their plate down to the last crumb, and they were recorded licking their plates. Okay. Some even became upset when non-participants in the cafeteria wasted food. So that is, pretty significant. The men were allowed unlimited chewing gum, water, and black coffee. They took full advantage of these privileges, chewing as many as 40 packs of gum a day and downing up to 15 cups of coffee. Okay, so they were just so starved, that they needed to chew and drink coffee to stay stimulated and up and full. They got limited to 2 packs of gum per day because the scientists were like, this is ridiculous, we got to limit them. So they limited them to 2 packs of gum per day. Others started smoking because it provided some relief from the hunger they experienced during the semi-starvation phase. So guys started smoking just to, delay the hunger. So now during the rehabilitative phase, more eating behaviors developed. Okay, men started eating several meals in one sitting and developed GI upset and headaches as a result. They experienced difficulties in reading their own hunger cues. So they couldn't even tell anymore if they were hungry or not. The participants described feeling hungrier and using binge eating and purging behaviors during the refeeding period. Okay, so they developed eating disorders. Even after 5 months of refeeding, they continued to use these behaviors and developed body image concerns. Okay, so there you have it. I mean, I went through the same stuff. Not the binging and purging, but, the binging. They went through behavioral and personality changes. Many were observed collecting food-themed items and even rummaging through garbage to find food. They developed an extreme distaste for wasting food, a behavior that's been observed in individuals with anorexia nervosa, and that's according to a study by Crisp, Sue, Harding, and Hartshorn in 1980. They started using methods to create the illusion that they had more food on their plates than in reality. They started toying with their food, cutting it into small pieces, making meals last for hours. They said as long as 2 hours they would make their meals last. Remarkable increase in the use of salt and spices to add flavor to meals. Okay. Extroverts became isolators and described themselves as feeling socially inadequate. That's crazy. Dr. Keyes, in his 1950 two-volume report, also reported a decrease in sex drive and interest in the volunteers. All right. Then they went through emotional changes also. Here are some of them. During the semi-starvation rehabilitation phases, they developed new anxiety and depressive symptoms not present at the beginning of the study. So they got depressed and got anxiety from not having enough food. Keyes recorded significant increases on the hysteria, hypochondriasis, and depression scales, indicating increased anxiety related to somatic concerns and depressive symptoms. Some became more sensitive and argumentative with others. And over the first 6 weeks of the rehab phase, many men reported feeling even more depressed than the semi-starvation phase, especially those in the group that were fed less calories in the beginning of the phase to test refeeding strategies. Dr. Keyes in 1950 in his report said that the only times these participants showed positive emotional reactions were in response to discussing their weight, food, or hunger. Physical observations, okay? So the physical observations. Participants' physical changes throughout the experiment were significant. Not only was it weight change during the different phases of the study, but they started to experience new issues with gastrointestinal discomfort, dizziness, headaches, decreased need for sleep, edema, hair loss, and cold intolerance. Even their basal metabolic rate, the BMR, changed depending on the stage of the study. By the end of the study, semi-starvation period, the volunteers' BMRs had decreased by 40% from their baselines. So they basically almost had just half the metabolism they had in the previous phase. I mean, that's amazing. The Minnesota starvation experiment ended in October 1945. The results provided vital data into the physical and psychological decline caused by starvation and offered guidelines on rehabilitation. Of the various methods deployed during the rehab phase, the most reliable method of weight gain strategy was high caloric intake. Simply put, starving people needed calories. So there was no real mystery about how to feed these people again. Just give them food. Keyes and his team released a 2-volume report, about 1,400 pages, in 1950 called The Biology of Human Starvation. One of the study's participants, Jim Graham, reported that even after the experiment, he remained obsessed with food, ate compulsively, and rapidly gained weight, rising from 122 pounds to 225 pounds in 6 months. Normal eating patterns took 3 years to return. So you wonder why we're so messed up from weight cycling our whole lives and being on restrictive diets. I mean, this proves it right here, and it was proved 80 years ago. You know, it's crazy. There was also a gentleman in the study. He was chopping wood, and he chopped 3 of his fingers off. So they asked him afterward, why did you do that? How did that happen? He didn't say it was an accident. He didn't deny anything. He said, I don't know what happened. So he was just probably so mentally messed up that he just chopped his fingers off. It's crazy. So after all this, can you see how restrictive dieting can affect you physically and psychologically? How many times have you done this to yourself? Once, 3 times, 7 times? Think about it. How many times have you done this? What was your caloric intake? Ladies, were you on 1,000 calories a day? Were you on 1,200 calories a day? Men, were you on 1,500 calories a day? 1,700 calories? 18? I mean, it's still not enough. Although the study reveals the effects of starvation on hunger on human subjects, why is it not used as proof of why restrictive dieting should be warned against? Personally, I see no difference between what the study's participants went through and what millions upon millions of people put themselves through on a daily basis. And for what? Vanity? A number on a scale? An aesthetic look? Health? That's rich. Acceptance? Validation? It's time we reevaluate what society says or thinks we should look like. In light of the information I've just provided you, what will your choice be? Continue the insanity of weight cycling? Or will you choose to get off the roller coaster? Make the sound healthy choice. Choose you. Choose freedom. Choose peace of mind. Choose a better life. If you need help, I'm here for it. Please like, share, subscribe, comment. If you need help, reach out to me. My email's in the About section. All right. I hope you guys learned a little bit today. And hopefully maybe it'll affect your decisions in the future. All right, guys. Here's to your health. Take care.